One of the series I'm exploring on my podcast, Missing Half, is marketing's impact on multiples in manufacturing and B2B. And I think that conversation is if you have a repeatable, scalable, and predictable marketing and sales engine, you are going to attract a completely different pool of buyers and completely different multiple range than if you just have a good business that they are going to have to figure out the marketing function from scratch.
Welcome back to Elevate Your Business, a podcast where we discuss proven, transformative approaches to business growth and exit strategies. Join us as we talk to successful entrepreneurs, share new and profitable ideas, and help you grow wiser and wealthier so you can experience limitless success in both life and business. Now, here's your host, Adam Koós, business transition consultant and founder of Elevate and Exit at elevateandexit.com.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Elevate Your Business podcast, an educational show exclusively for business owners looking for honest, authentic, fiduciary-driven insights and ideas on how to boost the value of their companies and prepare for successful sale and exit. The show is your go-to authentic, no-nonsense insights on growth, transition strategies, and everything in between. We bring you episodes monthly, packed with actionable tips and expert interviews so you can navigate complexities of business ownership, spend your time running your company, and then sell with confidence. If you find today's episode helpful, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, follow us on LinkedIn, all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and X, and be sure to check out elevateandexit.com for even more content. So that's all the housekeeping as always. Today's guest is Bill Woods. I had the pleasure of being on his podcast, and you got to check that out. It was a lot of fun. It was probably one of the better ones I've been on in terms of being a guest on someone else's podcast. We were just talking offline about how great their marketing is, and I mean, honestly, I've hosted, I don't know, at this point over 200 podcasts, and I don't know how many I've been on, but I was just telling him how it was the best post-production content I've seen anybody else do, and we were just kind of spitballing about what they're doing and how they're doing it. So he's the co-founder and CMO of 50 Marketing. He's got over 20 years of experience in B2B and manufacturing marketing and specializes in helping businesses craft winning strategies that drive real, actual results. He's also host, as I was just mentioning, of the Missing Half podcast. So if you want to look it up, that's how you look it up. Missing Half. It's dedicated to uncovering what's missing in manufacturing and B2B marketing. So Bill, thanks so much for doing the home and home here and joining me on my podcast. I think we can probably dive in here, but thank you so much.
Adam, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure.
For sure. Well, let's just dive in. I mean, what's the biggest mistake? I always like to start with mistakes, because there's, I think that we've got a little big piece of paper on our fridge at our office. It says there are no mistakes, only lessons.
Yes.
And I think that people learn the hard way oftentimes. And even if you're super successful and you learn from other people's mistakes and you read lots of books and watch podcasts, you're still going to make mistakes. I mean, in a perfect world, you want to learn from others. So I guess that's what I wanted to start with here is what mistakes do you see others make that our listeners, people watching can learn from, and how can they avoid those themselves?
Adam, that's a great frame to start this with. I mean, I'd like to look at the word fail, first attempt in learning. And if we think as marketers and as business owners, we're just going to find success after success after success. The people we admire, the people we emulate are people who've made more mistakes and recovered more quickly and gotten back up more times than others. It's not that they've just found that golden pot at the end of the rainbow. And specifically when we look at, what do I see in marketing and mistakes that people are making? I think strategy is a big miss. There are so many competing interests today. When I started out in marketing, there were, very limited forms of marketing. And now we've had the digital explosion and we're soon going into the AI explosion. There is so much to navigate, and having the proper strategy and taking time as owners with your marketing professionals, whether insourced or outsourced, to develop that proper strategy is so important. And then the other biggest mistake I see people making is that they don't listen to their customers. They come up with these ideas, and they're ideas that occur in the boardroom, on the manufacturing floor, in distribution, or wherever, and they're ideas that are generated internally that are not consistently validated with customer feedback. And then people invest millions of dollars, not only in marketing, but in capital expenditures, in developing things that shouldn't exist or be optimized. And then they wonder why they don't get good ROI. So we're in an age where voice of customer research isn't a nice to have, it is a have to have consistently, and we have to keep making deposits in that account. And whether that's every day, week, or month, depending on the scale of your organization, we have to be listening to our customers to make sure what we're developing and what we're doing actually matters to them and isn't just a pipe dream or something we want to do.
Right. You don't want to pay for marketing and advertising for top-notch Wagyu beef on the PETA website, right?
That would be a miss.
Yeah, it's probably not going to work out. Yeah, I remember an old consultant long time ago. She used to tell me, Adam, your team is so efficient, you're process driven, you've got the systems down, everything's systematized, but you do this ready, fire, aim thing. And she's like, you got to start aiming first. So, and there's a difference.
Yes.
I was on your podcast, Missing Half, and we talked. I don't want to give it away, so check that out. But you talk about a lot about uncovering gaps or filling gaps in B2B marketing. What would you well, what is that gap? We'll start there. And then what's maybe one major gap that businesses don't even realize they have?
That's a great question. So this is so fundamental. And one of my themes recently is marketing, especially in the B2B space, is simple, but it's hard. It is simple in having a great strategy. It is hard to execute it consistently over time.
Mhm.
And I think one of the biggest challenges and mistakes people are making is they find something that works and then they aren't making sure they consistently do it over time. For instance, LinkedIn is one of the most underutilized. I mean, you go on LinkedIn and there's tons of stuff there. And people have this conception that, oh, well, it's oversaturated. Nobody wants to hear from me, my company, my expertise, and my niche. The reality is when you look at the niche conversations that are happening, there is so much demand for content in niche categories. So if you're a manufacturer of a very unique widget that solves a unique problem, I guarantee you there's a vacuum for content on LinkedIn and on the internet and on YouTube and on the social channels for that. And on the flip side, people are so inundated with D2C, especially on Meta, on YouTube, that they don't think that they can carve out a space for themselves. And then the other thing I think that validates that falsehood in their minds is if they go, let's say we invest in a video content asset for a manufacturing company, and that video only gets 100 views. Well, we compare that to something Mr. Beast or some influencer does who gets 1 million views. Like, wow, that's a failure. Well, if your life cycle on that market is like 2 to 3 years to develop a sale that is $20 to $30 million, and you get 100 views of something that no one is watching for entertainment, like there's zero, like, oh, I was thinking about flipping through Netflix, or I was going to watch this video on my phone about this very complex niche widget. That's never going to happen, right? So if you had 100 people, and let's say even half of those are garbage, you had 50 people that could represent 10, 15, 20 million in revenue 3 years from now watching your video. I mean, where's the green jacket? Where's the ring? Where's the ceremony? That is a huge win. And I think we get caught up in this D2C market and all of this bandwidth and all of this activity and don't recognize how small our markets are and how incremental those little touch points are that can actually move the needle long term.
That makes a lot of sense. On the podcast that I was joining you on, we were talking about how things have changed, and I'm not a big believer in that things change frequently. I think that there's trends,
Sure.
kind of like you were saying with, I think where we were talking about the iPhone and the smartphone and how that was revolutionary, and then that maybe AI is going to be the next big, kind of like the smartphone, right?
Sure.
You've been in marketing for more than 2 decades now. I mean, that's a long time.
Ooh.
Sorry, I mean, I didn't mean to.
Yeah. He's gentle, Adam, gentle.
Well, I don't mean to drive the dagger in here, but I mean, in what's one strategy that worked 20 years ago, but completely, totally does not work anymore today?
That's a great question. And so the 50 marketing brand, our agency's brand, is that in 1896, John Wanamaker, the father of modern advertising, said half or 50% of my advertising is wasted. And this was in what, 1800s, late 1800s.
Mhm.
So there were like three primary forms of advertising back then, right? Now, I mean, we don't have enough fingers and toes, even if we take our shoes and socks off to count how many advertising methods there are. So I think that's a great question. And I think when we look back over time, I don't think there's anything really that has become completely obsolete, but I think there's become absolute segmentation between what is and isn't working. But then when I say that, that's almost false because things come back around. We can now do TV advertising with B2B directly to specific users with messages. So like when you think about, oh, well, people used to advertise on TV for some of the big B2B brands. Well, now that doesn't work anymore. Well, it probably doesn't work on the Super Bowl. But if you have targeted B2B buys for those buyers and you can deliver to their devices and deliver to their IDs, then you're probably back in the game. I've been having some conversations with some industry experts on direct mail, and everybody thought direct mail was dead. But we're seeing a return and a resurgence to B2B direct mail because we have guaranteed deliverability. We're competing with less traffic. I mean, I remember 20 years ago working for my dad. He had a fairly large business, did about $100 million. And we had a lot of employees here at the office. I remember the mail truck would come and there were these two huge bins that came in every day. And we actually had somebody, the receptionist, who would go to the mailroom and sort the mail into the slots, like old school, right? Now, here at our business, I mean, if we get 2 to 3 pieces of mail a day, it's a lot. And we actually look at them. Whereas before it was just like, wheelbarrow loads of garbage. So I think everything has its place. And the key, though, for every business owner is finding what works for you. And that has to be driven first by where does your audience hang out? And that becomes problematic because there are segments of the audience, your audience, who are users in different areas. So for instance, LinkedIn. I use some social selling techniques where I have 20 people I'm reaching out to every day on LinkedIn to connect in our ICP.
Mhm.
Some of those folks will not accept the connection for 6 months.
Wow.
Now, I know that it is not because they are just in awe of me and nervous to accept that connection request. Like they're contemplating it for 6 months. No, the reason is because they haven't checked their LinkedIn for 6 months. And these are professionals in marketing in 2025 in B2B, right? Which you would think that user group would be more active because that's kind of the platform for business on social. And if they're in the marketing space, that's kind of a thing, right? But I think it's very difficult for business owners to think about really testing and iterating and then scaling where their audience exists and being willing to go back to what we started talking about is fail. We have failed a lot for ourselves and for our clients on the paths and on the journey to success. So I think, does anything not work completely? I don't think so, but we have to be much more selective and we really have to test and find out what isn't going to work to dismiss it from what isn't going to work for us.
That makes sense. I find it particularly interesting, snail mail marketing, because you're 100% right. I don't get a lot of mail anymore. Honestly, the only mail I get are bills. So when something that's not a bill, on a relative basis, that's pretty cool. It's like, oh my God, it's not a bill. This is great.
It even works on younger generations. I mean, this is one of the conversations I've been having. So I have some children who are in college and approaching college, and the higher ed marketing is lights out with this direct mail. And even young people who are 17, 18, 19 years old are like, oh, wow, I got something in the mail.
Right.
And it's not that their generation is conditioned to that being something important, because like they don't send. I don't know that my children have ever really sent a letter, right? Like when we were kids, you would send a letter because that's how we communicated. I remember I was in Australia for 5 weeks once on a trip, and I sent some postcards back because when I was there, the only other way to do it was pay like $5 a minute for a phone call. So there were no phone calls, right? It was I had to I had to call into AT&T to some line my dad set up for me. Anyway, it was terribly expensive, and he was like, "Let's keep it short. How are you? Good. Okay." So, but yeah, the mail is a breakthrough, and let's be honest, in marketing, we need to be about winning, not altruists. So if direct mail is going to move the needle, and that's one of the touch points that attracts, that moves people through the consideration phase, that moves to the convert, I don't really care. I don't care what we do, just so the combination of the methods and tools we use moves the needle. That's got to be our job. And that goes back to the strategy. Um, you need to, business owners need to invest in people who are testing lots of stuff and failing at it and finding that right mix to move them forward. So yeah, that's just kind of my hot take on direct mail. Don't look at that as something that's too old or too cold, because it does work.
Yeah, it's almost like fashion coming, things that are back in, old back in the day come right back into style eventually. And for the
That's right.
never imagine why either. It's a good segue actually into my next question I had for you, which is just about brand positioning in general, and all the things you need to do. I think oftentimes business owners get this idea that, because of my business or my industry, what I do, this is what works and nothing else works. I need to just do this. And as a result, I think due to just preconceived notions, I think a lot of business owners struggle with defining, their brand positioning for starters. So, I mean, being a strategist as you are, what would you say your approach is to helping business owners and their companies stand out in what's obviously a crowded marketplace, no matter what your industry is?
A great question, Adam. So we often get this call from an owner, founder, C-suite at a manufacturing or B2B company that, hey, our website and all of our collateral, everything we do doesn't represent who we are today. I'm like, well, who does it represent? Who we were 30 years ago or 20 years ago or 10 years ago. And right, if you're around that long, you go through many, many changes. Nobody makes the same thing they did, 30 years ago, the same way to the same market, or rarely. So, whenever we get into that situation, we have some frameworks that we provide our clients, but here's some of the, I guess, biggest mistakes or biggest gaps or opportunities that I see. Number one, I think when you look at branding in 2025, we have to look at all stakeholders. So, especially for manufacturing and B2B and anybody who's struggling with recruitment, we not only need to look at our potential clients, but we need to make sure our brand message is also resonating for our recruitment and retention. So we need to look at the stakeholders of our current employees and potential employees, because that may be the demand issue we're facing, right? That may be the problem that is bigger than the customer problem at times. The other thing I see, beyond not identifying all the stakeholders and really making sure that it resonates across everyone as much as possible, is dialing in the difference between your brand promise and your brand aspiration.
Hmm.
So your brand promise is what you can deliver today to your client. So, and that starts with what we say in the advertising to attract them, what sales says to close them, what the actual product or service experience is, and then the CS team, and if there's aftermarket or follow up or whatever. It is that consistent thread that they experience the whole way through. That is your brand promise, what you can deliver today.
Okay.
The challenge we face, and this is especially with entrepreneurs and owners and founders in manufacturing or innovation spaces, their mind is not on necessarily what they do today. They have people that deal with that. Their mind is on what they are envisioning their company or their product or service, what it's going to become over the next 3, 5, 7 years, their aspiration. And you cannot communicate your brand aspirations as your brand promise, or you're going to have a disconnect with your customer experience. So for instance, if 50 Marketing said, we are enabling AI to transform your marketing function for B2B and manufacturing, That may be an aspiration of ours, and in 2 to 3 years or whenever on the horizon, we may be able to achieve that. That would not be the experience of our clients today. While we do use AI and we're trying to learn like everybody else is on that bleeding edge, we are not master practitioners that can deliver that at scale across our entire portfolio
Sure.
every day. So, I think those three areas, and we obviously have frameworks that dive really deep and do all of those things, but from a very high level, those are three areas that I think can be very, very problematic when you're trying to define your brand and then communicate it to the market.
Speaking of AI, I know that you just said what you said, obviously, but I mean, are there any specific tools or strategies that you've seen work exceptionally well, whether that be for you, your clients, or otherwise?
So where I've seen AI work really, really well is in tools that have it embedded in it. So for instance, like the call note takers, and you can ask questions for analysis, or some of the video clipping tools. There are very unique tools that have it embedded within the tool where they've kind of optimized it. Those things we're seeing create dramatic opportunities for optimization and efficiency. On the flip side, the agentic AI and really, replacing people and having it think for itself and all of those things, I think we're a little bit of ways from that really becoming impactful. Hallucination, um, privacy issues on data. I mean, there's a lot of issues that have to be dealt with and solved. And I think the problem right now with AI is everybody thinks that they can get a pro account and they're going to come up with something that's going to be the unicorn that, that they're talking about, the new 30-person multi-billion-dollar valuation company, right? That's going to be the new model. And, and I have several AI accounts like the Chat GPT and the Pro. And yeah, so I'm right there with those folks in Silicon Valley, and I can produce at a high level. So we're all playing, we're all experimenting, but we're a long way from that. And when I say a long way, it's not going to be 50 years, but we all shouldn't run from the room and liquidate our assets and buy a milk cow and start having eggs and doing our own gardens, because we're all going to get replaced, right? It's a long way off. The other thing, and my nephew works in a research university on this subject, and he said, the power issue has yet to be solved. There is not enough electricity on this planet today to power the ideas of AI and robotics. There's math, napkin math, that has not even been solved, let alone gone through to production and realization to make this work.
It's actually great news, because that means that that Skynet would just power itself down if it were to get into power, right? So we don't have to worry
Yes.
at all. So one of the things I hear a lot, I mean, I hear this when I talk about marketing with people, which, I have a couple different companies, but specifically when we talk to business owners about marketing and ROI specifically, I think owners have a lot of, well, they lack a lot of patience. There's I've always believed in marketing, you go big or you go home, and then
Sure.
second of all, you have to have patience. You have to give it time. So what would you say is a common misconception that business owners have about marketing ROI, in your opinion, and how do you help them rethink that approach?
So I think, and this is funny because I struggle with this myself. I tell our clients to be patient all the time, and you have to be, because it's not we all get sucked into these case studies and examples that occur for like D2C companies or for SaaS companies, where there's a very linear mathematical model that you can kind of measure inputs, and you can get that $99 a month sale for this amazing new SaaS product. And then you and I look at that and we're like, well, that has to be able to be true for our business. So why can't we get a $2 CPC and a cost per all the metrics? Can't we get those down to the same level as those folks? And that's not true for small business. It's not true for entrepreneurs. It's not true for B2B, because the economics are completely different. So I think when we look at how we have to be patient, which is so hard. I mean, I don't care what it is in life, it's so hard.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to really be willing to fail and not be too hard. Like if someone says, "Oh, we're going to try 10 things, and if 9 of them doesn't work, we're going to fire our agency, our marketing manager." Well, then you're just going to be very, very successful at turning over your agency and that marketing position. If you had a 50%, 50 marketing, 50%, 50% success rate, and then you start to build on those successes and remove the failures over time, can you get to a higher percentage of successes? Yes, but it takes time. And I think, especially when you look at the long buying cycles that occur in manufacturing and B2B services, you can't expect to start a marketing campaign and turn dollars in 30 days when your normal buying cycle is 24 to 36 months. You got to build brands. You got to establish authority. You've got to show up consistently to be considered by that buyer. And that's hard to do. That like just from a like not even from a business standpoint, from a personal standpoint. Like if I start a new protein shake and it doesn't immediately give, I started a new protein shake a week ago, and I don't feel more ripped and I haven't lost weight. I mean, it's been 7 days. Come on now, right?
Sounds like a terrible shake. I don't know. Yeah.
I got to find a new one, right?
No, that makes sense. I think that the patience thing is just so key, and I think that in this day and age, I think we're all being subconsciously trained to be less patient in our attention.
Yes.
You're just getting shorter and shorter, unfortunately. So, content strategy. You talked about tools. You talked about ROI. What about getting down and dirty? Getting our hands dirty with the content data. What's 50 Marketing's approach to content strategy, and how is it different compared to, say, a traditional, run of the mill marketing agency?
Yeah, so I think, and I don't know if this is completely new, but I think when we sampled our competition and sampled the market, the cutting edge right now is personal branding for the founder or the sales leader or someone in the agency to really move out there. And that might seem like it's oversaturated in the marketing space, but it's really not. We did a competitive analysis of what we consider our top 20 competitors, and less than 10% have someone like myself in a leadership role who are doing personal branding, who are posting on LinkedIn every day, who are recording the videos, doing the podcast, out there, attending the conferences, stages, the whole 9 yards. So if that's true in the marketing space, I guarantee there's a greater demand for that. There's a greater void in a lot of other industries and spaces, because marketing people like to chat, right? That's their thing. Like, whether you're a comm major or a marketing major in college, that was the group that was always ready to communicate, and the engineers walked by with their heads down, right? Like that stereotypes, but like that's just the way it was. So personal branding, I think, is a huge thing, and really going deep and getting busy in some of the platforms. So when we look at LinkedIn, there's a lot of things you can do in LinkedIn. There's a lot of things you can do in your data to like really make sure you're targeting your ICP. And the other thing I think about content, and we struggle with this daily, and I think B2B is terrible at it, is developing content that resonates for your audience, but also pays attention to the algorithms. Because if you want something to really go, and this is something I'm working on this year, is not only paying attention to the ICP, the ideal client profile, to our target market, but to also minding the fact that the algorithms matter. Because if we do a clip from our podcast, some of the clips get 3 views and some of them get 1,200. And I've watched them because like I'm trying to see what's the delta here, right? And I have no idea. So we figured something in the algorithm. So we have a couple people who are looking at that and trying to figure it out. And I know that in the D2C world, that's a very common practice. And just because of the volume in the audience, you're able to like test and scale more quickly. In B2B, it's a little harder. Also, I think because B2B folks aren't as willing to engage with the content. So there's less, even if you had a decent sized sample, I don't think you have an active participant sample that's going to interact. So it's a little bit harder to define.
Which is probably one more reason why it's so important to have good strategy. I've
Yes.
always thought about that. When you're talking about B2B, it's not the same as B2C. I mean, B2B,
No.
when I say we, you and I, we are busy. I had somebody upset at me the other day, not upset literally, but they were upset because I hadn't watched the Instagram video they sent me on Instagram. I don't sometimes I'll go 10 days without opening Instagram, you know? I mean,
Yes.
I just hadn't seen it yet. So, and then in terms of the algorithms, one of the things I recently learned, people use all these scheduling tools like Social,
Yes.
Hootsuite, things like that. Apparently, I just learned this from somebody who knows what they're talking about. Apparently, on Instagram and TikTok, the platforms and the algorithms don't like it when you use schedulers. So they prefer you use, so you're shaking your head, they prefer you use their tools and upload directly and spend the extra 30 seconds. Apparently, it's worth it. Otherwise, you're not going to get, and maybe that is the difference between 2 and 1,200 views or 12,000 for that matter. So I thought that was really interesting.
That is an indicating factor and is something that we use those tools for proofing and client interface, but then we actually go and post them natively in the platforms. Because when you're looking at the differential, I've heard anywhere from 20 to 30%. I think that is an average. I think it's actually much bigger than that in spaces where um, there's not a lot of supply of content and in B2B. So we have seen a dramatic impact because we've used all the tools. HubSpot, Hootsuite, Sprout Social, we've used them all. And all of them are penalized for not being native platform
Interesting.
hosting and distribution. So, Adam, that is 100% right. I don't have the studies in front of me where that's actually been validated by people who are like way smarter than me and actually have tested like a lot of posts. But I've seen the data, and that's when we changed our SOP on how we take those to market.
I don't think you need to have your research in front of me. Somebody who's been in marketing at least 2 decades, that's only 32 years old, like you are, that has the kind of experience. I mean, we're going to trust you, I think. But that's super.
Well,
It almost makes me feel like I need to get rid of our auto scheduler, right?
Well, I think the auto scheduling tools are valuable, especially like a Sprout that does a lot of analysis and recommendations. But certainly, the final posting, you should, as much as possible. And let's be honest, if we have to prioritize, so let's say we're posting across the entire spectrum, maybe we use the auto scheduler for TikTok because we're just doing TikTok to do it, but LinkedIn is our core and that's what's driving business. Then prioritize the time, make sure someone has time to post natively on LinkedIn. Especially, we have seen there's an outsized impact on personal branding. So, like, for instance, if I have someone post something for me on LinkedIn, so let's say I'm on vacation and I pre-do some posts, not that I would do this, and someone is going to post this so I stay consistent.
Mhm.
That has to be done on platform. Now, you have to be careful with that because you have to make sure that they can log in and those type of things, but do that on your platform. The company content is not as penalized, but it is still penalized for using those schedulers.
That's so interesting. I'm glad I asked you that. It wasn't one of my
Sure.
plans. I'm glad we
No,
talked.
that's okay. Yeah, fire away. Well,
Yeah.
we're off the rails. This is like
Yeah.
Joe Rogan and Theo Vaughn. You don't know where it's going, right?
Right. It's a free fall now. Now it's in all seriousness, the last question I have for you here. This is, a podcast that focuses on helping businesses grow and sell. So with that in mind, what for business owners looking to scale and eventually exit, which I think should be every owner's goal, honestly. Even whether it's exiting to a family member or going to PE or going to the auction, doesn't make a difference. What's one piece of marketing advice that you would give them right now in this day and age, 2025?
Adam, great question. And prior to my agency experience, I did over 30 in M&A deals with my father back in the late 90s and early 2000s. So I have some experience in this space. And I think when we look at scaling our businesses so that we can get it to a point where it can be sold, one of the hardest things to do is to be humble. What do I mean by that? If you want to grow your business to $100 million and have EBITDA of 20 and sell it for 7x, and that's going to take 10 years, you shouldn't be working on that problem. You should be working on the problem today in year one, month one, that is going to get you to that next incremental step. And the problem is, and I've struggled with this with businesses I've founded and subsequently sold, is I get so excited about that 10-year horizon that oh, I can't work on that little thing because it's inconsequential. It's not worth $1 million of EBITDA. It's not worth like that next leap. But the reality is the thing that's in front of me that is the most important is small, but it has to be resolved or we'll never get to that point. So I think if we're humble, that's like a general comment about M&A and that type of thing. From a marketing standpoint, one of the series I'm exploring on my podcast, Missing Half, is marketing's impact on multiples in manufacturing and B2B. And I think that conversation is if you have a repeatable, scalable, and predictable marketing and sales engine, you are going to attract a completely different pool of buyers and completely different multiple range than if you just have a good business that they're going to have to figure out the marketing function from scratch. So if a buyer comes in, especially if you're looking at, some of the big players, if you're at that scale at Goldman Sachs or, some of the more institutional type investors with really heavy horsepower, they don't just want to see a neat invention. It's not Shark Tank, right?
Right.
They want to see a mature company that has stood the test of time, that has a diversified group of customers, that has repeat customers, has a way to develop new customers and overcome churn, and has strong branding, and has a real way because that whole world loves forecasting. The forecast is more important than the result. Variance off of forecast, even if it's over, is bad. You have to hit the forecast. So I think having that predictable, repeatable, scalable marketing and sales engine is so important. And often especially when we look at some business owners, they're so focused on the thing. As engineers, they're focused on making the newest, latest, greatest product.
Mm-hmm.
They're so focused on whatever the service is and delivering great service, which is super important. But if you're going to pursue selling your business, you have to make sure you mind the marketing and sales function, or you're going to sell yourself short.
Yeah, you're selling a product at that point.
Yes,
and
that's right.
One that's not necessarily reproducible or repeatable. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, that's our time for today. Thanks so much for being a part of this again, doing the home and home, as I like to call it, whenever we go back and forth. I appreciate
it.
Please be sure to check out Bill's podcast. It's amazing. Again, it's called Missing Half. For any more insights you're looking for, information, marketing ideas, B2B marketing specifically. And if you'd like to get a hold of Bill, you can always get a hold of him on LinkedIn. We've spent a lot of time talking about LinkedIn today, so he's definitely there. You'll find him there. But he's on Instagram at 50 Marketing, Facebook at 50 Marketing, and his website is just simply 50marketing.com. And it's 50, by the way, not spelled out, 50marketing.com. But you'll see all that in the show notes and the notes below on YouTube. So as I always say, there's thousands and thousands of podcasts out there, no shortage, and you chose to give ours a listen today. So thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. To complete our free business valuation quiz or to set up an introduction call, just head over to elevateandexit.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal, financial, tax, or as a basis for investment decisions. Always consult a professional business transition planning consultant or a certified exit planning advisor before implementing any of the ideas shared in this episode.